Be'ez Hashem, we're only a few dafim away from finishing the Masechta, and we are holding Daf Shavuous Daf Mem Vav 46. 49 is the last daf, but 46 is where we're up to, and we're going to start from Mem Hey Amid Beis. Amar Shmuel, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. Okay, so we learned yesterday's daf is that sometimes Chazal believed an employee that he didn't get paid. An employee goes over to his employer and says, "Hey, you didn't pay me." The employee will swear the Hi Alan, we just began. So we're on Menhei Amid Beis. We learned yesterday that one of the shvuas that the Chazal put together that allowed, normally a person swears and he's exempt from paying. But here, by an employee-employer situation, the employee can swear to the employer that I did not get paid, and then he'll be able to collect. Okay? Because employer is busy. Sometimes he overlooked paying an employee, a particular employee. So therefore, Chazal said, we believe the employee if you take a shvua that he didn't get paid, and then the employer will have to pay it. So here we are. Amar, a little bit before the lines get wide, Mem Hey Amid Beis. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Rav Nachman said it in the name of Shmuel. Lo Shanu, it was not taught what? That the employee swears Elas Sacharai Be'edim. Only if we have witnesses that the employer hired this person in front of witnesses. You hear where we're going over here. If the employer hired this person without Eidim, so then the employer, you have to believe the employer without a shvua. You believe him that that he paid his employee. But why? Because he has a migoy. He could have said to the employee, I never even hired you. So therefore, because he has that, and no one can prove him wrong because he never hired this person with Eidim, he can tell him, I hired you and I gave him your payment. Hi, Lewis, we just began. A little bit memhei base before the lines get wide. Amalei Rabbi Yitzchak Yasha, you're saying correct. V'chein Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Same thing Rabbi Yochanan said. Michlal the Palig Rish Lakish, where Rish Lakish argue against Rabbi Yochanan regarding that migoy, that the employee has to prove that he was hired with Eidim. So would Rish Lakish argue against Rabbi Yochanan, who made that statement? We don't know what Rish Lakish holds. Rabbi Yitzchak was just saying that Rabbi Yochanan said the same thing, but he wasn't aware if Rish Lakish, the fact that he was quiet during the lecture that Rabbi Yochanan gave, doesn't mean he agreed with Rabbi Yochanan. It could be that he was drinking something and he didn't have an opportunity to express himself, his opinion, or he just waited. He was just silent, waiting to Rabbi Yochanan complete his thought, and Rabbi Yitzchak in the meantime left the room. So he doesn't know if Rish Lakish argued. But the point, what is the point that we're trying to make? So here's the Gemara just repeats it in the name of Rav. Itmanami Amar Rav Nashmi Bar Zvid Amar Rav. Not only did Shmuel said the same idea, but Rav said the same thing. What is the same idea? The same idea is Lo Shanu wasn't taught that you believe the employee saying he didn't get paid, and he swears to his employer he didn't get paid, and the employer has to pay. That was only when El Shashchare Be'edim. Only if we have witnesses that the employer hired the employee. So that there's no way, there's no other taina that the employer could say. All he's saying is that I paid you. Aval, but if he hired the employee without witnesses, since the employer has like another way out of it, he could have said, I never hired you, proof that I hired you. So therefore, he could have said that, and he didn't say that. So you have to believe the employer when he says, I hired you and I gave you your payment. So that was the opinion of Rav and Shmuel. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Bachama, Kama Malya Shmaitza. How precious is that statement of Rav? Alma le Rava my malusa. What is so great about that statement? That you always, if someone has a migoy, he's always believed. If you would you say that if you have you could have said a bigger lie and you said the small lie will believe you. Is that always is that such a smart thing to say? In Cain, how would it ever be that if you go, let's say a shomer says, I was watching your item, and unfortunately you want it back, an oinus happened, some tragic mishap happened to the item, it's not my fault. So the Torah tells you that that the shomer has to make a shavua, right? He has to make a shavua that he's telling the truth. Why? Why does he have to make a shvua? Every shomer has a way, another taina. He has a migoy. Since he can tell the depositor. He could have said, "Oh, you never deposited. I never got anything from you." Right? So you could say that. So then believe him when he says nensu, that something mishap happened to not my fault. And so why did the Torah says no? He has to swear nensu. Why not? Why? He has a migoy. Answers the Gemara. The Torah is talking about the afkid le be'edim, that he deposited by the shomer with edim. So again, so he has edim that he deposited. So he can't say, oh, it never happened. I have witnesses that I gave you that I deposited something by you. So therefore, the shomer has to swear. So the Gemara asks back, but he still has a migoy. The shomer could have said, I gave it back to you. Then believe him when he says that a mishap happened. So again, he's back. He does have a migoy. So why does the shomer ever have to swear? He has a migoy. And says the Gemara, the afkid le b'shtara, that no, it's the depositor gave him a star. That when he gave over his items for this shomer to watch, he has a proof on a document that he deposited something in the bank, right? He deposited something by this shomer. And if the shomer actually returned it to him, he should have received the star back. So the fact that that the mafkid is still, the depositor is still holding on to the star, his bank statement is a proof that the person never gave it back. And if he never gave it back, he doesn't have the opportunity to say hichzarti l'cha, and therefore his only taina is nensu. He doesn't have a migoy, and there the Torah says you swear. Michlal, the Tervayu Sviru, both Rava and Rami Bar Chama, both hold Hamafkid Eitz Lechaver Be'edim. If you deposit next to somebody with Edim, Ein Tzarech Lahachzod Loi Be'edim. You don't have to return it to Be'edim. If there was witnesses that you deposited, the shomer can return it to the Mafkid even without Edim, right? The only thing is, so therefore he could say Hachzarti Lecha by if it was deposited by Edim. Bishtar, if you deposit something by Ishtar, if you want to return it back to the owner, then you have to return it to him with Edim. And because the other guy is still holding on to a star that he deposited something by you. So therefore, the fact that the mafkid is still holding on to the star takes away the taina of the shomer to ever say, oh, I gave it back to you. And because of that, therefore, he could only have one way he has only one statement. He's saying nensu. There, the Torah said you have to make a shvuah. Bottom line that we're discussing over here is, let's go back to what we discussed. Rav said that an employee is believed to say that I didn't get paid, and he has to swear that he didn't get paid. But he has to prove, what does he have to prove? That he was hired with Edim. Because otherwise you'll believe the employer. The employer could have said, oh, I never hired you. So the employee, besides swearing, has to prove that he was hired by Edim. But Rav Sheshes disagrees with Rav and Shmuel. He never has to prove that. All an employee has to swear. If the employer says, I paid you, the employee doesn't have to prove that he was hired by Edim. The employee, all he does have to swear. Rav Sheshes argues. Rami Bachama later Rav Sheshes. Rami Bachama called about Rav Sheshes, V'yasem Daven es Devarim Ba'ela Beliboy. He, like David HaMelech, he thinks things through before accepting that. The Ashkechei Rav Sheshes Rabba Bar Shmuel. Rav Sheshes found Rabba Bar Shmuel. Amalei. So Rav Sheshes asked Rabba Bar Shmuel, Tani Marmidi B'Sacher, did you learn anything about the employee? You have a brisa. Tell me a chiddush about an employee. Amalei, so Rabbi Bar Shmuel told Rav Sheshes, I have something to tell you. Tanina, we learned in a brisa, Soche bezman nishba v'noito, Ketzat, bezman she'amalei schati v'lenosati l'chari, v'aloi amischaticha v'nosati l'choschari. An employee can swear when the employee says, you hired me and you didn't pay me, and the employer says, I hired you, but I paid you. That's when the employee swears. If there's an argument between the employer and the employee, what the exact amount is supposed to be paid. The employee says you're supposed to pay me $2 an hour, and the employer says only $1 an hour. So then the employee cannot swear and say, oh, you said $2. He has to prove it. He has to have Adim that's heard that the employer said $2. Hamid the Sefer Baraya. The end of the Brisa says that the employee has to bring proof. Haresha, but the first part of the Brisa, Beloy Raya, he doesn't have to bring proof. If the employee is saying you didn't pay me, and the employer says I did pay you, all the employee has to do is swear they didn't get paid. But he doesn't also have to bring a proof that he was hired. So we see from this brisa of Sheshes that an employee never has to bring Eidim that he was hired. That's Rav Sheshes' opinion, disagreeing with Rav and Shmuel. From this brisa, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman Yitzchak defended Rav and Shmuel. This brisa is not a question against Rav and Shmuel. We go to Amid Aleph. Reisha of a Sefer Baraya. Even in the Reisha, the employee has to bring a proof that he was hired. And even the Sefer has to bring a proof how much the exact amount they agreed. The Raya, the Shalom Katani, the end of the Brisa just says that the employee has to prove exactly how much they agreed upon would be his wages. So once he brings that Raya, he gets paid right away. But in the Reisha, Raya the Shmuel like Katani, the Brisa doesn't mention it. Because even if he brings a raya that he was hired, he would still have to make a shavua, the employee, that he didn't get paid. So that raya is is one step for the ultimate getting paid. So that raya, the brisa doesn't discuss. But truth be told, that you also have to bring a proof that you were hired. That's what Rav and Shmuel. So again, it's machlekes, but an employee says to his boss, I didn't get paid. So Rav and Shmuel say, hey, not only do you have to swear that you didn't get paid, but you also have to be proof that you were hired in the first place, because otherwise the employer could always say, I never hired you. Amar Rab Yirmi ba'ama, shalch lemi bei Rav l'Shmuel. They sent from Rav to Shmuel. Rav had a yeshiva, and they asked a question to Shmuel. Yelamdeinu Rabbeinu. Let's say the employer and the employee have an argument what the amount of the hourly wages would be. The Uman says $2, and the employee says employee says it was $2, and the employer says no, I only hired you for $1. So if they have an argument exactly what the amount the agreed upon salary is, mi nishba, who does the swearing? Shmuel says, Bezu, in this case, it's not the employee that's going to do the swearing. Yishava bal habayis v'yafsud umam. The bal habayis will swear, and he'll swear how much he made up. Obviously, he's going to swear we made up $1, and the employee is going to lose out because kitzitza v'adei mitcha dechire inshe. A person will always remember, as an employer, you remember exactly what the amount of money you agreed upon, what the salary will be. But because you're busy in paying so many different employees, you may have overlooked in paying this employee. So therefore, we believe the balabas, all he has to do, the owner, the employer, all he has to do is swear what he remembers the wages are, and the employee loses out. Says the Gemara, Aini, that's not true. Tani Rabbi Baba Shmuel Kotzes Hamaitzi Mechaber Alaya. V'iloi Maisiraya Poka. The Brisa says in Rabbi Bar Shmuel that if they made up a certain price, that they're arguing what the wages are, then the employee has to prove it. He's not believed by the shvuah, but the employee has to prove it. If he doesn't prove it, paka, he loses out, even if the employer doesn't swear. Amai, why does the employee lose out if he can't prove it? We still need Yeshava Balabayas, Yafsaruma. We still need that the employer should swear and the employee should lose out. I mean, we don't just absolve the case without having the balabas swear. So why does this brisa seem to imply that the balabas, the employer, doesn't swear? Amar Rav Nachman, we're misreading the brisa. Let's start in Ketanu. It means two sides of the coin. Either two possibilities can happen. Maybe Raya V'Yitel, the employee will bring a proof what the exact amount. He'll have Adim that were there and heard from the employer exactly how much he's paying him. So he'll bring proof on his side. Or if he can't bring proof on his side, Yeshava Balabayas V'Yafsar then the Balabas, the employer, has to swear what he remembers their wages are, and then the employee will lose out. So we see that Yeshava Balabayas V'Yafsar Uman. So now we're going to bring a brisa that's going to say, no, in this case, if they're having an argument of what the price is, the employee swears. Meisvei, I'll ask you a question. A guy gives, let's say, his talis to a cleaners. Uman Oymen Katsatsi L'Shtayim. The Uman says that we agreed Shtayim, two, the employer, right? But the guy that owns the talis says, no, I was supposed to only pay $1 for this cleaning. And the cleaning guy says, no, we agreed $2. Calls mantra talis biad uman alabayis lahaviraya. As long as the uman did not return the talis, the cleaners did not give the talis back to the customer, then the balabayis has to prove what the price was. But nesanaloi, but if you already gave it back to the talis back to the customer, bismanoi, if the owner of the talis didn't pay yet, and now it's the time that he's supposed to pay the uman, the cleaning store, nishba v'noitel. So he swears nishba v'noitel. He could just swear that I was like it statzti l'chalachas. I was only supposed to give you one, and then he keeps it. Avas mane, but if it's a long time past, hamaitzi mechavera olavaraya, then it's the uman has to prove exactly how much he was supposed to get paid, because you already returned the talis back to the customer. So, but nevertheless, the brisa says, "Bismanoi mia nishba v'noitel amai." If it happened right away, then who would be swearing? Basically, this would be not the uman who's claiming two, but actually, it's like the employee swearing, and he keeps it. He gets the lower amount. So, v'amai, why not? Yeshava balabayis v'yafsid uman. Nishba v'noitel, I'm sorry. It says that the uman would swear and he gets to keep the more. The question is, because the uman is like the employee, and the brisa says the employee will swear and get the bigger amount. So the uman will swear and you get shtayim. But the question is why? Yeshava balabayis, the balabayis should swear, the Yabsud Uman, and the Uman should learn out, should lose out. Because just like you told me that if there's a machlokes exactly what the amount that they agreed upon to pay, you always say Yeshava Balabayas, and the Uman loses out. And now you're saying the opposite. Yeshava, the employee swears, and he collects. So the Gemara just goes back and forth. We're gonna go all the way down to a few lines down, and the Gemara is going to say like this. The Gemara is going to say that Shmuel said, who swears? If they have an argument of what the wages are, Shmuel says the Balabayas swears. The Balabayas does the swearing. In other words, the employer swears. And the Brises say that the employee swears and collects. So that will be going with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And now the Gemara on the bottom of the page just says, Ela baha amarava bahakami palgi. So what is the argument? Again, Shmuel will align himself up with the opinion of the Rabbanan, And the Rabbanim will hold that if it's a machlokes in the price, the agreed upon salary, the employer swears. And Rabbi Huda says the employee swears. And what's the arguing about? Rabbi Huda Sava, b'deraisa avdulu tekanta l'sachir. Normally, when there is a shvua d'raisa, then we flip it onto the employee. In other words, if the employer says two and the employee wants two and the employer says I only owe you one, so the employer really is chayav a shvua d'raisa, like a moed b'miktzas, and he should really swear as a moed b'miktzas and not have to pay. So according to Rabbi Huda, in that event, Chachamim turned the takana and made it easier that the sochir, the employee, should swear and collect. So therefore, this employee will swear that we made up a higher price, and the employee is going to win. That is when there's a problem of moed mixes, right? Over the Rabbanan have a takanta, but to when there's a person who denies everything, if there's a machlokes of if you deny everything, if the employee says I paid you already, and the employee says you didn't pay me, then the kanta lekanta lo yavdinim. Then the employer will do the swearing and not the employee. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the employee will swear, and when it's a shvua d'raisa, we'll transfer it to the employee. When there would never be a shvua d'raisa, it's only a shvua d'rabbanan. If it's only a shvua d'rabbanan, so then the employer will do the swearing, not the employee. And the employer will swear, I paid you. Even if it's a machlokes and the employer denies totally, he says, I paid you already. And the employee says, I didn't get paid. Even then, the Rabbanan said that the employee should do the swearing. However, here's the point. Uktzitza, but when it comes to remembering how much was the wages, mitka dakir, employer remembers exactly what wages he agreed in. And if the employer remembers that, then we don't make the employee swear. We always trust the employer and we make him swear. Okay, back into new Gemara. Nigzal, Ketzad. The Gemara says if a guy claims that a guy walked into his house and took kalim from him, so the nigzal, the victim, could say, oh, you came into my house and you stole something, and he swears, and the gazlan has to pay. How do you know that he's a gazlan in the first place? V'dilma loy mishkanai. This guy said he's going to go into somebody's house and take a mashkin because he owes him money. Maybe he never followed through. How do you know he's the gazlan? Milay Omar Rav Nachman, didn't Rav Nachman say, Hai man de noket narga bidei. If a man is holding on to an axe, v'Omar, and he says, Ezel v'ektele ledikla de planya. I'm going to chop down somebody else's tree. V'ishtakach the ketil, and we find out the tree was chopped down. Lo yamrinu, we don't say to who katle that this guy who said he's going to do it was the guy that chopped the tree down. Because why? Ovid inish the gazim v'loy ovid. People talk big and then they don't follow through. Hachinami the gazim v'loy ovid. How do you know this gazim was the gazim? He said he was going to go into somebody's house and take something, but how do you know he actually followed through? So the Gemara says, Ema, it must be that imishkanai. We saw him take something. So the Gemara says, then why does the God Nigzal have to swear? Just see what the guy walked out of his house with. Here's the point. That we saw this guy with the mashkin, he took some kalim, we know what he took, but he also is carrying something underneath his coat. So that we don't know what he took, but we know now he went into the house to take things. So the Nigzal says, hey, you took my silver becher. And the Gazlan says, no, I didn't take your silver becher, I took a plastic cup. So now, who do you believe? Here, the Mishnah says the Nigzal will swear and will believe him, and the Gazlan has to pay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda makes a new comment. Ra'u shehitmin kelim tachas knaf of yotza. A new story. You see a guy walk out of somebody's house, and there's kalim there's vessels right underneath his coat. Okay, what's the V'Amar? We go to Amud Beis. He says, the kuchen heim biyadi. I bought them. These are items I bought from this guy's house. The other guy says, no, I lent it to him. I loaned it to him. So he has to return it. Ein Neman, the guy that took the items and put it under his coat, is not believed. V'loy Amram, this was only said, only if he did that he's not believed that he bought it, is Ella Balabayish and Osalim Kalev. If we're dealing with an owner that normally doesn't sell things. So therefore, how am I going to believe this guy? He said, "Oh, I bought it from him." This guy is not in the sales business. But if we're dealing with an owner that sells constantly his items, then the guy who we see him take it is believed to say that he bought it. And if a guy who normally doesn't sell his kalim, but sometimes he does, okay? So then, we also said that the guy's not believed to say he bought it. It's by things that people normally don't put it under their coat. If, let's say, a pen. So if it's questionable, why are you putting it under a coat? It must be you stole it. It must be you borrowed it. But then we don't believe you when you say you bought it. But if it's something that people put under the coat, like a diamond, even if it's a guy who normally doesn't sell things, but if it's a diamond, the guy's believed to say, I bought it. Why? Because sometimes even a person who normally doesn't sell things, he's trapped for money, so he'll invite somebody into his house to buy something from him, to buy diamonds. If the guy walked out with the diamonds, then the person can't say, I lent it to you. You didn't lend it to me. The guy could be believed to say, I bought it from you. Even if it's something that normally people don't hide, a person who has no problem carrying things in his hand. If it's a person who's like modest, he's always putting things under his coat. That's his normal way. So we'll believe him when he says, and we don't have this statement. If they're debating, this guy, the owner says, the original owner says, I lent it to you. And this guy who walked out with things under his coat says, I bought it for you. But if the guy says, you stole it from me, that guy has no right to call somebody a ganef. So if he's calling him a ganef, then we're not going to even believe the original owner of it. It's only if he's saying, I lent it to you, and the guy says, I bought it, then we believe the guy who says, I lent it to you. It's only by things that people normally rent out or lend out. If it's something that normally people don't lend out or rent out, then the guy is believed to say that he bought it because it's something that is normally not lent out. So then the taker is believed to say that he bought it. The Shalach le Rav Huna bar Oven, and we're going to finish in 1 minute. The Shalach Rav Huna bar Oven, Dvarim ha'asurin lahash lahaska. If it's something that people, if we're dealing with items that people normally rent and lend out, v'omar, and the guy who has it says lekuchen heim biyadi. Oh, I bought it. Ein neman. He's not believed because these are things that people normally lend out. So you can't just say, I bought it. People lend svarim out. They don't sell svarim. Omar Rava, Rava, like the case of Rava. He found amongst Yisraelim that their father left them scissors, a special type of scissors, or books for Agadata Gemaras, and the Yasmin didn't know how their father ended it up, how they had it. And the original owner says, hey, I lent it to your father. So then Rava took it away from the Yisraelim and gave it to the original owner. And he didn't make the owner swear because it makes perfect sense because these are the types of things that you lend and borrow. Finally, one last piece of the Gemara, another half a minute. The Gemara says like this. We said that the Nigzel could swear that this guy took items from my house. He took my gold becher, and you'll believe the Nigzel. Amar Rav says, "Afilu shaymin ishba, afilu ishtu shaymin ishba." The guy himself could swear that things were stolen from his house. His watchman could swear that this guy stole something from his house. Even his wife could swear that this guy walked into the house and stole something. It's not just the owner of the house swears, we'll believe him. Even if the shomer or the wife of the owner swears, we'll believe them too. Let's say somebody who's just a worker in the house. Would we believe does him if he swears, oh, this person went into the house and took something? He's not the owner. Take it. We remained unresolved. Finally, the Gemara says, Amalei Rav Yemel Rav Ashi. Rav Yemel said to Rav Ashi, Ta'ana Kasa the Kasma. Let's say the Nigzal says, you stole from me a silver becher. And that's something like it's very unusual for a person to own a silver becher. Because we not so. If the Digzal is a rich person, then we believe him. Or even if he's not rich, but he's a trustworthy person, the mafkid anoshi gabe, that people will give him a silver becher to watch. Then again, so the Nigzal mishtabe v'shakal, he could swear that this Gazlan came into his house and took it. V'loi, but if it's something unusual that he claims to have had in his house, we don't believe in, and we don't allow him to swear that he had it in his house. So these are unusual cases where the employee swears or where a nigzal will swear. Okay, we'll stop over here.